around the world are under the age of 17. Do you realize how staggering a number that is? 40% of the males that are addicted to pornography are teenagers or adolescents. That's the danger of having access to this kind of stuff. And so we greatly caution parents to be so careful with technology. It could ruin, literally ruin, a young man's view of masculinity. Do you know why? Because all of the studies are in, the data's in. When people view pornographic images, especially a man, and not saying women don't, but when a man views that, it tremendously affects his view of women. It causes what the world would call a toxic masculinity. So it causes a tremendous lack of respect for women. It causes men to view women in a very, very perverted, dysfunctional way. And so now women are responding, young girls are responding to that. Love, because of the need to get attention, because most mothers and fathers have their heads buried in their phones, young girls are reaching out to young men their age, and the only way to respond to them is through sexuality. And we've got a real problem on our hands in Christianity when it comes to gender identity. And it's significant. And it's showing itself. It's rearing its ugly head. And I say that knowing that there are no teenagers in the room, but doesn't mean that it shouldn't be taught, and perhaps somebody who views this will see it and then maybe share it with somebody. I don't know. But it is true that the differences between men and women are shrinking. Used to be, you had almost no trouble visually identifying a man from a woman. It's getting more challenging. Men are becoming more feminine. Women surely are becoming more masculine. And, the differences are shrinking. It still stands that biblical masculinity is under attack. I'll throw this out there. And just because I throw it out there, obviously does not mean that you have to agree on any level at all. But I personally believe that one of the reasons why former President Donald Trump was so hated by the media is because he represented a form of masculinity that the political landscape has not seen in a very, very, very long time. He certainly portrayed himself as an alpha male. People are fearful of that kind of masculinity. But yet it's the very kind of masculinity that many areas of society need. Men to take their place. For you should never forget that God did not give dominion of the earth to Eve. He gave it to Adam. Adam was given dominion. He made man the overseer of the garden, not woman. And I talk about this stuff because so much of what people, in the book of Revelation, he tells John to eat the book. And at first it's sweet, then it becomes sour. There's truth to the saying, you are what you eat. You know that on a physiological, biological level. What you eat affects you, right? But you are what you read. And you are what you allow to influence you. And so when you get this kind of anti-manhood, anti-masculinity in the education system, it's going to cause a very, very significant removal of males from masculinity. It's going to remove the masculinity out of men. And don't think it's not by design. You notice all of the, I remember reading an article one time that too much soy depletes testosterone. And that's why, they're big into the school lunches. They're feeding all these kids an overabundance of soy, and they're quickly getting them labeled as ADHD so that they can get them on the Ritalin. And that is to tame the savage beast. In other words, make pansies out of young men. That's not by coincidence. That's by design. And this kind of stuff is actually planned out. And so we see here that biblical masculinity is not only a genital distinction. It's much, much more than that. In the Bible, so the genital distinction is a given in the Bible, just so you know. There's such a thing as male genitalia and female genitalia, and as far as God's concerned, that is what defines, okay? You don't have to ask yourself, am I a man or a woman? If you find yourself asking that, you're probably being tutored and nurtured by someone that doesn't have your best interest in mind. So the Bible assumes gender identity, simply. For all gender comes, listen, God could have made woman first, could he not? If God wanted to, could he have made Eve and then made Adam out of Eve? Of course he could have. But he didn't. He made Adam first. He gave Adam dominion. What does that mean? Well, we get other English words like dominant, dominance. Now, that does not at all mean that man is to dominate woman. Man is to lead woman. He's to protect woman. But man is to have a desire to have control and power. And it's essential. Any system that does not have a hierarchy is a system that will fall. There has to be a hierarchy. There must be. Could you imagine? Think about it. Could you imagine what any branch of the military would be? And it's wonderful to have Brother John back. But could you imagine what a Coast Guard base would be like if there was no hierarchical structure? It would be mass confusion, right? Think about it. It would be absolute, utter confusion. But I say that to say this, that is unfortunate. Jim and Terry and I were talking about this before church. That is what happens when leadership in the church does not lead. It causes confusion. And whenever authority is removed, it causes a vacuum. Don't be so simple-minded as to think that someone or something won't take the place of that. Why do you think there's an all-out attack? My brother-in-law sends me emails, and it just was so timely. Just like supernatural. I didn't memorize the email. I'll look at it much closer, and I'll write it down and give it next week. But it was, I got the email, maybe it was sent yesterday, but I read it this morning. And it was on today's man. And it talks about a man who, uses his mother's address, buys a house, lets his girlfriend and her kids move in, so that, he could then get Section 8 to pay for the $900 a month for the mortgage. And the girlfriend could get her food stamps and her Obamacare. And he comes and goes as he pleases. Maybe she has a child or two of his, because she's already raising two from another man or two in her life. And it goes on and shows how the government pays all this out. In other words, the government is paying to destroy the family structure. You see, when you remove biblical manhood, the place of the man out of a home, someone has to take its place, and mark my words, the government wants to be daddy. And so there's a problem. And so what is a man? Let's get into this. What are the qualities and characteristics of biblical manhood? I'm not so much even going to give the biblical aspect of it today, just to talk about a few of the characteristics and qualities of masculinity. And number one, and this is an important one, a man should never disgrace himself. In other words, he should be in such control, not of those around him, because don't mistake this. Some people think because they can dominate and be domineering over other people, that makes them a man. Because the guy won't be a man in his house and his wife runs him around by her apron string, he has to be hyper masculine outside of the house. And he's usually a creep because he has all this aggression penned up, and he's frustrated. And that is what allows him to justify his refusal to take his rightful position in his home and in his relationship and in his family. You think about the Oval Office. Remember when Slick Willie was in? How disgraceful that he would, and by the way, he was not the first and isn't the last. How disgraceful for a man to allow that office, the physical office and his position in that office, and the position in our government, that this is a man that couldn't even control his own moral, and in this case, immoral desires. That's disgraceful. That's not a man. And I promise you, if he were standing here right now, I'd tell him right to his face, in my book, you are not a man. A man does not act like that. A man does not behave like that. A man would never use his position or power to do that. Now, I'm not at all on the side of the Me Too movement. I think that is in and of itself unconstitutional and bigoted on a number of levels. But I'll be the first to tell you that men in power can certainly overstep that power, especially in the secular world. And so women cry, oh, the casting couch, the casting couch. You think that's something new? It's been around ever since Hollywood's been around. Did you not ask yourself what you would have to sacrifice to find this fame and fortune? I wonder if those questions were ever asked. Did you think it's just because you were a pretty face? There's millions of pretty faces out there. I find that whole industry, I think it should all be nuked and sent to hell, personally. But I'm not shocked by that. And so a man should never disgrace himself. How does that occur? How does one protect himself from disgrace? Letter A, under number 1, control. Learn to control yourself. You realize that you cannot control other people. You know, you can only legislate behavior, right? Legislation is designed to keep stupid people from being stupid. It's not designed and was never intended by our forefathers to infringe on the rights and liberties of clear or clearly thinking individuals. It's not a hard concept to grasp. But a man, do you know that in almost every state, homosexuality is still a law? It's still a crime on the books? When's the last time you heard somebody get arrested for deviant sexual behavior with a member of the same sex? Not in my lifetime, and I don't plan on seeing it either. But there was a time that that law was enacted. Why? What was the purpose of that? Trying to legislate behavior. That doesn't mean you can control a man from desiring another man. Only the Bible can do that. You get it? But that was the purpose of legislation, to control the behavior of other people. For the